Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first May month's webinar about the connection between your brain health and your hearing. So today's presenter is Dr. Nicholas Bray. He is a postdoctoral fellow at the School of Medicine at Mann University. And his research explores brain function in aging, tests lifestyle intervention strategies to help older adults maintain their quality of life, and promotes healthy lifestyle across the lifespan. Today's session will explore the latest science on hearing and brain health, discuss the benefits of hearing aids, and highlight other strategies to stay engaged and connected as you age. And I will pass it along to Nick right now, and everybody enjoy the session.
So, as Marta said, I'm a CIHR postdoctoral fellow in the School of Medicine. And so for the next 45-ish minutes, I'll be taking you through this presentation, which focuses on lifestyle as medicine, protecting the brain and the body as we age. Hopefully, by the end of this presentation, you can have an appreciation, if you don't already, that these two are very much interconnected and intertwined, even though sometimes they're treated separately. So just before I start, it's very important to me that I do a land acknowledgement, and I just want to take a second to acknowledge that the lands on which MUN campuses are situated, which is where I'm presenting from today, are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. And a beautiful province it is when the weather's nice, as we all know, or when it's not windy, which is sometimes few and far between. Okay, so I'm going to start this presentation with a few disclaimers, some to keep myself safe, I'll say, and others just to provide some context. And then we'll jump into the meat and potatoes of the presentation, if you will. So as Marta said, I'm a postdoctoral fellow, and my research really focuses on two streams. My program's focused on two avenues. First is really understanding, say, the intersection between cognitive and physical decline, but from the perspective of the brain. So how those two interact or intersect relative to brain function. And down at the lab, we have some fancy tools that we can use to measure that brain function. And then the second avenue of my research, which is kind of what we're going to focus on today, although elements of this will be sprinkled in, it's about testing intervention strategies to help older adults age in place. And aging in place is important because it promotes or maintains quality of life, and it keeps you out of the healthcare system, which are both very important right now and going forward. Okay, yeah, so just a couple of more disclaimers. I've very much learned that when we're going to talk about intervention strategies or lifestyle medicine, it can be a hot button topic, if you will. I want to make it very clear that I am not coming to you, I recognize it's red, but from my ivory tower. We all have very busy lives, and some of the strategies that I'm going to discuss today add to that busyness. And just to show that I have a busy life or a busy life, this is just my wonderful, beautiful family that I'm very blessed to have. And some days the only exercise I get is chasing around. Well, it was chasing around the 5-year-olds, but now the 1-year-old is also very mobile, which has just come on in the last couple of weeks. So I guess my exercise is going to increase even more. But I very much recognize we all live very busy and hectic lives, and it's not always possible to be as healthy as we want. On top of that, before you engage in absolutely any lifestyle strategy change, etc., you should always check with your primary care provider or your family physician if you're fortunate enough to have one. Some of this will sound like a broken record when it comes to discussing lifestyle strategies, but the devil's in the details. And I think at the end of the day, there's going to be a few, more than a few, I hope, caveats or snippets, if you will, that you can come away from this. And hopefully, more than anything, recognize that small changes could have big impact. And finally, I think it's important to acknowledge, especially given the current climate, that these health inequities is a very much a focus of not only just my research, but the broader research scientific community in general. So it's just important to me that I recognize and acknowledge that although we're going to talk about lifestyle strategies, some of these do come with an associated cost that's not always accessible to all people. So although that's not the focus of my presentation today, I'm happy to chat about that more during the Q&A period or offline, if you will. Okay, and finally, I know a number of disclaimers, but if at any point this sounds like I'm selling something, I promise I'm not trying to in any way, shape, or form, but it's kind of hard to talk about my research without emphasizing my research or what we're doing. And so if you are interested in getting involved in, I say my research, but it's really a team, the team that I'm fortunate enough to be a part of. But if you are interested in taking part in any of the stuff you hear about, particularly about brain function. We have one study going on right now. And yeah, you can just contact us at the information provided. Okay, so with those disclaimers out of the way, I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we're going to cover today. So an introduction, and the introduction is mandatory in order to get us all on the same page. We're all coming from different backgrounds, different levels of expertise, knowledge, and hopefully just a basic or a general introduction will get us all on the same page. I'll then get into the crux of the presentation, which is the healthy lifestyle, particularly the modifiable strategies, the defined ones. Then I'll sprinkle in a couple of others after, if you will. Finally, I'll wrap up and give you the key takeaways. So if I lose your attention during the presentation, that's okay. We can skip to the last slide and you can just get the Coles notes. And then finally, we'll do some Q&A, hopefully if you folks are interested and there's time. Okay, so introduction. So cognitive decline, which is represented right here, is a normal part of aging. Most people don't realize that, but yes, unfortunately, cognitive decline is a normal part of aging. Just like how your muscles waste away, just like how respiration decreases, pick any physiological system, decline is a normal part of aging. When we get worried is when someone slips from that solid black line onto this dash line, because then it's happening at an accelerated rate. It's happening at a rate that is faster than what we would expect of quote unquote normal aging. And that likely puts you on a trajectory, although not always, but likely puts you on a trajectory to a dementia syndrome. And so dementia is an umbrella term for a loss of memory and other thinking abilities severe enough to interfere with daily life. And the reason why I put in this slide is because without fail, someone always asks me, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? So Alzheimer's is dementia, but dementia isn't necessarily Alzheimer's. Stated differently, dementia is a number of different syndromes, and Alzheimer's is one of them, and it gets the most notoriety or gets interplayed with dementia because it's the most popular or most common, if you will. But there's a number of other dementia syndromes, including Lewy body, vascular, frontotemporal, etc., all the way up to mixed. And we're actually learning that vascular and mixed plays a much more important role than we ever potentially gave it credit for. So why do we care about dementia syndromes and frankly other aging syndromes, issues, what have you in general? Well, our population is aging. So, interestingly, as this figure shows here, you can see the number of older adults is increasing at a rate that just generally is increasing. And it's increasing at a rate faster than, say, children to 0 to 14. So our population is aging, both absolutely and relatively. And so with that comes an increase in aging issues like dementia, diabetes, osteoporosis, etc. And so for a lot of these syndromes, issues, etc., there's no cure. So this is a very busy figure, and you don't have to get bogged down in the details. It's actually from 2013, so it's a little bit dated now. But this shows, or each one of these shapes, so circle, triangle, etc., shows a drug that is currently being explored as part of the Alzheimer's drug development pipeline. So in terms of trying to cure or cure part of the Alzheimer's pathology trajectory, etc. But as we all hopefully know, or if we don't know now, you will, there's no real cure for dementia. There are medications that can help with the issues that plague dementia, such as our cognitive abilities, but ultimately there's no cure. And so together with our aging population and the lack of cure, if you will, for dementia syndromes, there's been a cultural shift, if you will, to prevention as the best medicine, if you will. So modifiable lifestyle preventative factors that may not entirely stop, but at the very least could delay and delay quite substantially. And so this works, excellent with this beautiful thing that we have in our head. This beautiful organ, this squishy material, the brain. And so, not too long ago, we thought that, there is some room for change, growth, etc. But once we hit a certain age, that brain kind of hardens, if you will, just like cement, and it really can't change that much. It doesn't have the ability to adapt. We now know, as is the case with science research, it's constantly progressing, that that couldn't be further from the truth. And our lovely brains are actually quite modifiable, even up until very old age. And so this is where you may have heard the term neuroplasticity. And in short, it means that our brain is affected or impacted or changes based on our experiences. And again, it can undergo this change relative or even into very old age. And so trying to bring all this together, as I kind of wrap up the introduction here, this first report from Livingston and colleagues, which was originally released in 2019, but was updated just last year, very, very, very important piece of literature in my field and others. It concluded that 45% of dementia or dementia cases are potentially modifiable. Again, I'll say that. So 45% of dementia or dementia cases are modifiable. And so what this means is that we can change our trajectory, if you will, to a dementia syndrome. Again, this is going to be the crux of the presentation today, specifically what can we modify or what makes up that 45%, because there's 12 factors. I won't touch on all 12. They overlap, if you will, as if they're a Venn diagram to a certain extent. But I'm really going to focus on the big factors that contribute, 7, 8% to that 45%. the bang for your buck, if you will. Okay, so just to wrap up and or summarize the introduction. So cognitive decline is a normal part of aging, but we get worried when it starts to happen at a faster rate, such that someone slips onto this dashed line. Our population is aging, and for many syndromes, issues, diseases, there is no cure. To that end, there's been a cultural shift to modifiable lifestyle factors as prevention, or prevention being the best medicine. And that works great for our brains because it's not, in fact, concrete. It's more like rubber or plastic, and it can be shaped up until very late age. And up to 45% of dementia is modifiable through these risk factors that can have a positive impact on our brain. Okay, so that does it for the introduction. And now we'll move into, hopefully everyone's on the same page. So we'll move into, as I said, this modifiable strategies piece. What makes up that 45% of that 2024 paper I just highlighted. Okay, so over the next X amount of slides, I'm going to take you through these 5 strategies. And like I said, to an extent, some of this might sound a bit like a broken record, but I do think the devil's in the details, and I'll encourage you to not lose focus or attention just because you think it might be something that you've heard before. So let's start off with physical exercise. Usually I recognize, I'll just go back for a second, that I am talking, on behalf of the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association. And even when I don't present at a hearing-related event, I'll say just older adults or Gen Pop in general, people always want to know about the hearing loss piece. They're very intrigued by it. So I've learned, in order to keep people's attention, to put the hearing loss at the end. That kind of keeps people on the edge of their seats because that's what they want to get to. And I think I'm okay, or I'm amongst friends. Again, given that I'm here presenting on behalf of the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association. So the hearing loss piece is intentionally at the end. But I also put it at the end because it'll be theoretically front of mind for lots of questions. Okay, so let's start with physical exercise. Hopefully, more often than not, the first thing that comes to mind is some aerobic activity. When I say aerobic, we think of something like jogging, running, cycling, swimming. But without fail, again, when I give these community presentations, especially when they're in person, walking always comes up. And so I want you to keep that one at the forefront of your mind, if you will. So specifically walking. Now, the long lost brother, if you will, of exercise is resistance training. Resistance training holds a very near and dear place to my heart. As I said, it's very, very much forgotten. To put it in context, we're currently conducting a systematic review on high intensity aerobic and resistance training in stroke and dementia syndromes. We found about 20 studies that have focused on aerobic and 6 for resistance training. So again, it's about a quarter of the research in resistance training. And of course, aerobic and resistance training are not the only 2 modalities that can be deployed. You have Tai Chi, you have CrossFit, you have swimming. That could be more aerobic again. There's a combination of different exercise modalities that can be used. I'm just focusing on aerobic and resistance training because they tend to have the most research, with balance or yoga / Tai Chi being very close seconds or thirds, if you will. So when it comes to exercise, this is a very, very important piece. We want to be conducting 150 minutes per week. And in doing that 150 minutes, we want it to be at a moderate to vigorous pace or intensity. And this is for aerobic exercise. So when I say moderate to vigorous, we would go to the talk test. So a good way to gauge it is, if you can have a normal conversation with your friend while you're exercising, that's usually light. If it gets to an intensity where you're kind of having 1 to 2 words, how was your day? Mine was good. How was yours? That's starting to get into a moderate intensity. And then when we get to something like vigorous or strenuous, we're not worried about talking. It may become something that more so we're worried about surviving or trying to just get through it, if you will. But the reason why I highlight this difference in intensity, and the reason why I ragged on aerobic exercise earlier walking earlier, is because walking is rarely completed at an intensity that crosses that threshold of moderate. And in not crossing that threshold of moderate, it's not going to have the health benefits that we want, or it's not going to elicit the physiological response that we want. Now, if you enjoy walking and you're walking every day and you're happy with walking, you are still doing far more than what most of us are, sometimes myself included. So at the end of the day, I can't emphasize enough that something is better than nothing. But if you really want to squeeze the most out of it, especially your time commitment, if you will, I think of juicing an orange. We want to be doing it at an intensity that is moderate, such that it elicits a health benefit. Again, I'm going to give another caveat here that, before you go, decide to jump in right away to do 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous aerobic exercise, when you haven't done anything in the last amount of weeks, months, or years, please chat with your family physician or primary care provider, or someone close to you to ensure that it is safe, because there's lots of caveats for this statement that I have up here. And then finally, we want to be engaging in muscle strengthening activities, i.e. resistance training, at least twice a week. I'd actually like to see that number higher, but based upon CSEP, which is a gold standard in exercise science and personal training. So yeah, the muscle strengthening piece, resistance training, at least twice a week. I'd like to see it higher. Muscle strengthening, again, is one of these things that, yes, it's going to have a positive impact on your brain, but it's also going to be very critical, and more critical than aerobic exercise, as per some research, to things like falls, walking, picking up grandchildren, getting up and downstairs, up off the toilet. So yes, in terms of functional abilities, muscle strengthening, there's an argument for it being more important or more essential, or even maybe more sensitive than aerobic exercise in aging. We also want to be engaging in balance training when possible, and then several hours of light physical activities. But that just gets to the point of more is always better, or from the perspective of we really have a population that doesn't engage in enough or sometimes any exercise. So we're just trying to get people moving as much as possible. And so even though I'm focusing on the brain here, I've kind of given away this kicker that, physical exercise really has a sledgehammer effect on health. You'd be hard up to find a study, research, etc., that says, physical exercise does not have a positive impact on this health-related outcome. If you know of that research, you've read that research, and it's from, peer-reviewed resources, please share it with me, because I'd be very intrigued to read it. These guidelines are great, but they're guidelines. We all live, as I've kind of alluded to, we all live very busy, very hectic lives. So it's about what works for you and when you can make it work for you. And again, I've kind of given this kicker away. So, what works for you? It's great that I'm saying, 150 minutes, 2 times a week, resistance training, more light exercise, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to really look at what works for you. And that's not only from a time commitment, although I'm emphasizing the time portion. It's also from the functional abilities or capabilities, if you will. As we know, older age, excuse me, is typically associated with a number of injuries, pain, etc., throughout the body. So again, what works for you in terms of your capabilities? Maybe more importantly, what will you enjoy? So it's great for me to go on and on and on about you should do this program or that program. Frankly, I can create the best exercise program in the world for you. But if you don't enjoy it, experience tells me you're not going to do it. And finally, what are your short and long-term goals? Is it just about being healthy? Is it about being able to pick up grandchildren? Is it about just maintaining quality of life for as long as possible? These are all things you need to consider, and they need to be considered by you, and for the most part, only you. And I always put up this picture again because, like I said, resistance training is near and dear to my heart. So when I did my master's at UBC, as part of that, we did a intervention in pre-frail females, so specifically females. And so at the time, there was a paucity of research that, or I should say there's a claim that, older adults really couldn't do high intensity resistance training. And there still is, more work to be done in this. But, we showed that over 12 weeks, when programmed appropriately, older adults can, in fact, do high intensity free weight resistance training. And just for context here, this individual, she started with just the bar, so no weights on the side of it. And by the end, she was able to lift quite a bit more than that. And more importantly, she was able to pick up her grandchildren, which was, a big goal of hers. I can't emphasize enough that one of the main goals of today's research is to create exercise plans that are tailored to each person's unique needs, and we still have a far ways to go or to get to that point. So even though it's nice to have these guidelines, these broad strokes, about 150 minutes and 2 times a week of resistance training, the goal is to get more individualized, personalized prescription. And we're still a ways to go for that. Each year, we'll continue to make progress. If you have me back next year, hopefully I'll have more specifics to provide. But yeah, we still have a far ways to go. Okay, so with physical exercise out of the way, let's move into nutrition, which, you could argue is the other side of a similar coin. We'll probably get through these next couple a little bit quicker. And the reason why I spend so much time on physical exercise is because when I look at those, that 45% or that modifiable piece, exercise only makes up 2 or 3%. But by the time you think of the sledgehammer effect it has on other outcomes or factors that are listed, it's actually more like 18%. And the same could be said for nutrition as well. And when I say other factors that play a role in that 45%, I'm thinking blood pressure, lipids, etc. Things that are impacted by physical exercise, nutrition, etc. Okay, so you're not going to hear me say the word diet. I might say it or use it just instinctively or naturally. But when I hear the phrase diet, I definitely don't think of something that's sustainable long term. So instead, you should be thinking about, lifestyle, again, lifestyle modification strategy or a nutrition strategy that is sustainable long term. Not crash dieting, if you will. And again, we're back to the idea of, what works for you, what will you enjoy, and what are your short and long-term goals. And, for me, there's nothing I enjoy more some days, if you will, than sitting back with a pizza or a burger and fries. So yes, please take that into consideration. Again, just because I'm involved in the community with some of, a significant portion of my research. Just a couple of weeks ago, I chatted with an older adult who felt like he was experiencing some pretty rapid muscle loss throughout his legs, and as a result of that, he started taking protein shakes and creatine. And since then, he's seen it go the other way. So it seems to turn back in a positive direction. Now, am I telling everyone on this call to run out and start drinking protein shakes and creatine? Absolutely not. All I'm highlighting is that is an individual that saw some decline that he didn't appreciate or didn't like. He looked into and chatted with his healthcare provider about what might work for him. And this is something that he is now finding is, in fact, working for him and is conducive to his goals. So again, when we hear the term diet, again, I don't like it, but when we hear the term diet, there's a number of different diets, if you will, out there. And they all have fancy names, acronyms, what have you. I did a quick dive on this. So you have keto, DASH, but it gets more confusing, paleo, Atkins, vegan, Whole30, and on and on and on it goes, all of which have different strategies, thoughts, etc. And, kind of as the last figure showed, it's mind numbing at times. There's really only, I'll say one, but it's a combined couple of strategies, but there's really only one diet, and I have it listed here, that's at least associated with positive outcomes. So I'll just read the title. So the Mediterranean diet, and the Mediterranean diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, which is known as DASH, and Mediterranean DASH intervention for neurodegenerative delay, MIND, are associated with less cognitive decline and lower risk of Alzheimer's disease, a review. So the take home there is, the Mediterranean diet, if you will, is generally associated with less cognitive impairment. Again, this is the only diet strategy that I'm aware of that has been known to have a positive impact on brain function, cognitive health. Again, if you know of something else that's from reputable sources and has been shown time and time again through various research groups, I'm happy to look at that and chat about it. So, inevitably the question is, what is the Mediterranean diet? And there's probably, again, maybe a risk of being a broken record. There's no real surprises here in terms of what it focuses on. So, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, seafood, nuts and seeds, if you will. Those are the quote unquote good or checkmark things. And then, you try to avoid processed foods, refined grains and sugar, saturated fats and trans fats. On top of that, red meat is limited to once, maybe twice a week, and the same goes for alcohol intake. And I say once or twice a week, but I should say, one or two meals or one or two drinks per week. Okay, and that brings an end to the nutrition component. So now I'm going to touch on cognitive exercise and social isolation, and I'm going to do these in unison because they typically go in unison together. Well, yeah, go in unison. So again, this can be a rhetorical question. What are some examples of cognitive exercise? And there's a lot, just like physical exercise, that come to mind. And these are just some of the strategies that I could think of. So playing games or puzzles, which I know is one thing my father loves to do. Then we have, learning a language, learning to play an instrument, journaling, or card games. And again, all of these, which can or without, depending on how you feel about it, it can be done with or without friends. Hence the social isolation piece. When it comes to these cognitive exercises, if you will, it's very important to highlight that diversity and or complexity are key. So if you do just one task, you're going to get really good at that task. So if you do Sudokus, you're going to get really good at them. If you do crosswords, you're going to get really good at crosswords. That doesn't necessarily translate to everyday life, if you will. So that's why the diversity piece is key. Doing lots of different games, tasks, if you will, and trying to push what you're doing. Along those lines, we really don't know as much about duration, intensity, kind of the parameters that we do for physical exercise. Again, these are active areas of research. We're not entirely sure, how much is needed or how hard it should be. So, at risk of a blanket statement, again, try to think that more is better and always trying to, quote unquote, push yourself to do cognitively demanding tasks or tasks that are hard. Because again, that'll likely have the greatest greatest transfer to everyday life, if you will. And finally, when I talk about cognitive training, I'm inevitably asked about these brain training games, if you will. Luminosity, what have you. There's a number of different ones out there. I like to say you can change marketing, but you can't change physiology. These are just some of the news articles I was able to find in preparation for this talk. The reality is, again, to the best of my knowledge, there's no hardcore tangible evidence showing that any one brain training game is specifically linked or associated with cognitive improvement or preventing dementia. So although marketing might say this, again, I'm not aware of any one game that has been scientifically proven to do that. Do I think they help? Absolutely, because again, anything is better than nothing. And if we're pushing our mind, our brains to its capacity to think, that is better than the opposite, which is doing nothing. But again, no tangible evidence that I'm aware of that consistently shows any of these games are indeed warding off dementia, if you will. And so along these lines, I just want to highlight, although we're still in the realm of cognitive training, but it's overlapping with social isolation. I just want to highlight, I'm here talking, on behalf of the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association, Newfoundland, but there's a number of different associations out there that you can get involved with, that can connect you with people that are like-minded, that put off a number of different social engagement events that are ultimately aimed at helping older adults age, as effectively as possible. If you don't think an organization exists for your interests, I'll encourage you to reach out to Seniors NL. So just like the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association NL, who support my research and who are a research partner in the work that I do, so is Seniors NL. And I think of Seniors NL as almost this great connector. So if you're interested in it and it has to do with older adults, then Seniors NL probably knows about it and they can connect you with the right people. And again, this is along the lines of trying to engage other older adults or be with other like-minded individuals that want to engage in the tasks that you do, such as cognitive training. And so just want to highlight here as I'm getting close to the end that, with the right strategy and the right plan, you can really tackle three of these elements at once. If you're engaging in physical exercise, well, that's one component, right? And if that physical exercise is cognitively demanding such that you have to think about it, we think of motor tasks as one, but even learning resistance training exercises, especially when they're of the free weight variety, thinking about where my body has to move in space in order to effectively complete this task, well, that absolutely becomes a cognitive exercise. And then if you do that, you go do that resistance training with a friend or a colleague, and you're chatting with them during the exercise, in between, if you will, preferable. Well, now all of a sudden you've kind of hit three heads right away in terms of these modifiable risk factors, and you've now touched off at least a third, if not actually more than half of that 45% of modifiable risk factors for dementia. Okay, so now into the final piece of the defined strategies. Like I said, I intentionally left this to the end. And well, I won't give the kicker away. We'll get into it, but I promise I'll tell you how much hearing loss makes up in terms of that 45%. So hearing loss, just to show that, this isn't biased, and because we're here, just because we're here for the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association, what I'm about to present is based on tangible scientific evidence that comes from very reputable journals that have been, found, or these findings that, come from over a decade of work, right? And this is not the only two studies that say this. There are multiple studies. These are just two prominent ones that I picked out. And from those prominent studies, there's some real kickers in terms of take homes. About 20% of people suffer from hearing loss, and that's just in general. Maybe Marta can tell me my stats are dated, but we'll say about 20% of people suffer from hearing loss, but that number climbs substantially when we focus on just those that are of old age, so 60 plus. Hearing loss, unfortunately, like many other health issues, is often untreated. So we only go get treated or go get help when things have gotten very bad or very poor. And for every for every 10 decibel decrease in hearing ability, there is a 4 to 24% increase in dementia risk. The variability it depends on what study you pull out. But essentially, again, as your hearing decreases, your dementia risk increases and increases pretty substantially depending on the study. The question I'm asked constantly, inevitably, is why? And unfortunately, we don't exactly know. We can't pinpoint what exactly it is. The leading strategies are the ones that I have defined here. So the first piece being reduced auditory input. So with hearing loss, you're just not getting the stimulation, the input that you'd normally get in your day-to-day life. So if you're on, a street corner, you can hear a dog barking, you can hear horns honking, you can hear people having a conversation next to you. You're also listening to maybe your phone, what have you. All of that is sensory input, and it all requires more or less of your attention, i.e. if you're getting ready to cross the road, you're crossing the road. And so as a result of hearing loss, that stimulation is essentially turned down, if you will. I think that analogy fits pretty well. And so less stimulation, less input. And now you're going to start to get into what I would say are, is a Venn diagram or confounding factors that impact, or you kind of create this positive feedback loop. So then you get into, does hearing loss lead to social isolation, or does social isolation, that might be a bit of a stretch, lead to hearing loss. But where I'm going with this is that people that have hearing loss tend to isolate socially. And so as a result of that, that can increase. And when I say social isolation, they don't engage as much anymore. So if they're sat around the table and they frankly just cannot hear the conversation that's happening, they'll kind of withdraw a little bit. And so from a broader perspective, that social isolation has been linked to depression, which is another risk factor for dementia. Again, you start to get into this positive feedback loop. And then on top of that, you have reduced cognitive loads. Whereas I previously talked about, cognitive exercises. If you're someone that's socially withdrawn, if you're not going out as much, not participating or engaging with friends, well, all of a sudden you have less cognitive load on your brain in a day-to-day sense. And that has a negative impact on brain health. And then finally, there's a possibility that the factors or the issues that cause neurodegeneration, and I'm talking from a pathological, from a molecular level, those that impact, and cause neurodegeneration in areas that impact brain health, brain function, in regions that are important to, say, memory, executive function, also impact regions that are important to hearing. If you will. When I say regions, I mean brain regions of interest. So yeah, again, no solid or this is why, but these are all theories and again all findings that have been backed by research. So what's the solution? Well, there's potentially multiple solutions, but the one that shines through time and time again, and I'll highlight that I was not paid by the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association to say this, is to wear your hearing aids. I'll say it again. wear your hearing aids. And I don't want to throw stones at anyone that's on this call, but I will say typically it is one sex more than the other that tends to have hearing aids, but refuse to use them. You can imply from that what you want, but I think we all know which sex I am talking about. And so the reason why I say wear your hearing aids is, well, because of this research here, which again, from reputable journals over, the last X amount of years, showing that people with hearing loss who use hearing aids had a significantly lower risk of cognitive decline. I've even read research that has bordered on saying, not that it wipes it out entirely, that risk of cognitive decline, because it just won't be wiped away entirely, but it just drastically reduces it. And so to provide some numbers on this, one study showed that the median time, so we can just say the time to dementia, was 2 years for non-hearing aid users, but 4 years for hearing aid users. So people that wore their hearing aids took twice as long to progress to dementia. And just again to highlight that this is an active area of research. This is a study that was published just this year, and I found this very quickly. I can't speak to the quality, but again, an active area of research. And this was a presentation done just a few months ago from a professor at the University of Manitoba. It's a little heavier on the research side, if you will, especially the technical jargon. But again, if this is something you're interested in and you want to learn more, then the CLSA cohort or study is a wonderful resource. Okay, I'm very quickly gonna pull through these next couple pieces, the other modifiable strategies, and then the wrap up. So when I say other modifiable strategies, there's a couple of different ones. Do I think all of these will make it onto that 45% or add to that 45%? No, but they are strategies that I think could be helpful. So the first one being vitamin D. I'm going to skip through this. This was vitamin D, this study, we used vitamin D as part of an intervention strategy. The older adults did resistance training, aerobic training, and then took some high dose vitamin D supplementation. And again, that can be a pretty easy strategy, if you will, that could have at least some benefit. We showed it had some benefit with our research. The next being sleep. If I was to pick one of these three to be on, the updated Livingston paper, which, potentially won't come for another 4 more years, sleep will show up on that. And, it'll be interesting to see. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I think, you will see sleep, and it'll be interesting to see how much or how big of a percentage that contributes to the modifiable piece. And this is a huge area of research right now. And then finally, medications. Medications are here to help, but we know that when someone's taking so many medications, 5 or more actually, with the term polypharmacy, they can actually have a detrimental effect. So if you're confused about your medications, you want to know more, you want a review of your medications, because our family physicians are so overwhelmed, overworked, and they don't have time. I don't want to say they don't have time to handle it, but it's just one more thing. But if you want a third-party independent review of your medications, I always try to highlight this service. So this is being put off by the School of Pharmacy. I don't think you can walk in. I think it's better to make an appointment, but you can go down with your list of medications. They can take you through it. And I think at the very least, write a recommendation for what changes should be made to your medication intake. Okay, and so just to wrap up here very quickly, what are the take homes? So if I've lost your attention, and in my other stream of research, when we measure your brain function, we say if your default mode network's on because you're mind wandering or daydreaming about things you're going to do later today, then tune back in for me, and I'll give you the Coles notes here. So we want to be engaging in 150 minutes a week of moderate to vigorous aerobic exercise. Again, anything is better than nothing, but if you want to get the most out of it, you want to do at least 150 minutes a week, and it needs to be at an intensity that's moderate, and that intensity is relative for you. We want to do muscle strengthening exercise or resistance training 2 times per week. We want to have a nutrition strategy that resembles the mind approach, which was very much nested or grounded in the Mediterranean diet, if you will. We want to engage in diverse, cognitively demanding tasks with friends. Again, diverse, demanding tasks with friends. Wear your hearing aids. It's I don't know if I said it of all the single items that are listed on that 45% that's modifiable. Hearing aids is the biggest at 7 or 8%. I think it's 7% now. And then I just want to highlight again, this is all still very much an active area of research. We've come a far way in the last decade, 2 decades, and I'm excited to see where we'll be in another decade or 2 decades. But we still have a far ways to go. And that is it. I just want to take a second to acknowledge my wonderful supervisor, Michelle Plowman, and the Recovery and Performance Lab. These are all people that I collaborate with, I supervise, etc. And this stuff just would not be possible without them. So I'm forever grateful for their help and support. So with that, I'll stop sharing. I think Marta will probably come back on and join us. And then I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Thank you, Nick. That was excellent, and it gave people some food for thought. I'm hoping, and hopefully they are encouraged to actually take their hearing aids out of their drawers. So we do appreciate.
You said it, not me.
We do appreciate you reiterating it multiple times, because this is what we try. That's the message we're trying to get out there and explain to people how important it actually is. Just to again reiterate, so for people with untreated hearing loss, the risk you said goes 4 to 25% every 10 decibel drop, right?
Yeah, that was over a couple of different studies. It was showing,
Yeah.
so for every 10 decibel
But
decrease.
it does increase
Yep.
pretty significantly with hearing loss. Is that reversed with hearing aid usage? And how much do people need to wear their hearing aids to reverse that? Would it help if they only wear it like once in a while, or?
Yeah, I think, first I'll be the first to emphasize that the hearing aid piece, I'm not the expert in, if you will. I think when you're spanning across a region that is dementia and trying to include all these factors, each of us have our own little niche, I'll say, within it. So I'm not entirely aware, I'll say, of what extent wearing your hearing aids changes the risk. That said, just anecdotally, if you will, once people just make it a habit to start wearing their hearing aids and get through that initial threshold, I'll say, of getting comfortable with them, it really becomes second nature to just do it. And so once you're doing it or wearing them, there's no real reason, again, I'm not someone living with hearing aids, but once they're in, there's no real reason then to, take them out, if you will. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I can't speak to specific percentages. And again, I'll highlight to everyone here that I'm not being paid by the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association to say this. But as someone that has a father-in-law with hearing aids, this is a constant discussion and, trying to get him through that threshold. And, this is one thing that's kind of provided motivation for him is me telling them, well, it's not just about your hearing. Right, it's more than that, right? So yeah,
absolutely. We say all the time that the hearing organ is actually the brain, right? The ear is just an instrument of getting the sound to the brain where the sound is processed. So when hearing loss happens, the brain is not stimulated enough in layman's terms. So and that is probably why the cognitive function is affected. We have another question from the participant. They tell you that it was a great presentation, and they also ask if dementia increases the risk of falls for people. I know that hearing loss definitely does. There is a higher incidence of falls within the hearing loss
Hmm.
population, but dementia, uh, hopefully you can answer that.
Yeah, so this gets in. Thank you for the kind words. I very much appreciate that. Um, this gets into. I'll try not to always I try not to ramble in my answers, but yeah, it's a layered subject. So, um, I'll start by saying, what we do know with aging is that all these health issues, et cetera, that are unfortunately associated with aging, they're very much a Venn diagram. Before the field of geroscience kind of came online, we used to treat them or think about them as in being in silos. And that's just not the case at all. And so to that end, I was very fortunate to do my PhD with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Manuel Montero Odasso at Western University. And the very crux of his research program emphasizes the interaction between physical and cognitive decline, if you will, and showing that, it's not that, people with cognitive impairment are at risk of dementia, and then people say with postural instability are at increased risk of falls. It's not these two separate silos. It's very much, and I know I'm doing a bad job explaining this, but it's very much like this. So people that are having cognitive impairment are also suffering falls, and frankly, people with postural instability are also at an increased risk of dementia. So it's very much an overlap. And to just give you a short answer, yes, yes, it absolutely does.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And it's a different perspective. People tend to separate different issues, but it's one brain. So I guess, if one part of functioning is affected, then the other part gets affected as well.
Yeah, and that's
Okay.
why down at the lab we have we have these nice caps we put on people, and we're looking at the interaction between front
Yeah.
part of the brain and then the motor part of the brain.
Another person wants to know if music, if played loudly, can cause hearing loss or not. And I guess that's more a question for me,
Yeah, I
since
was gonna
we are the
say, yeah.
hearing specialists. And noise is definitely a big, big contributor to developing hearing loss. And the hearing loss developed through noise exposure is sensory neural hearing loss. It means it happens in the inner ear and it is not reversible. So another thing to think about is how often and how long do you listen to loud music or other loud sounds, right? Because if it's one loud song you hear once a year, is not the same as listening to loud music every day for extended periods of time. But yes, loud music, especially if you play it in your headphones or AirPods, earbuds, that definitely affects the hearing negatively. So over time, noise exposure is guaranteed to cause hearing loss. So everybody should be very cautious, especially using headphones and other personal devices. So I'll read the whole question. Thank you for
Yeah.
this presentation. I'm interested in the relationship between hearing and cognitive decline. I haven't had a chance to do a literature search myself, so I am wondering if there is much literature around the perception knowledge of that relationship among elderly population.
Mm. Yeah, and then to the last piece too, I feel that health literacy gaps is prevalent when it comes to
Yes.
healthy aging. Yeah,
Yeah.
so the first part, a great place to start, just from a literature or knowledge perspective, is that 2024 manuscript I highlighted. It's essentially a compendium of very important resources, scientific studies, etc., that this 45% modifiable is built upon. So just going there and starting there will give you a broad sweeping overview of where the current literature is. And then from there, because again, it's built upon, best prior, excuse me, scientific research, you can parse out the individual studies you're interested in, and then go from there. And if you're anything like me, that'll send you down the rabbit hole of finding more and more and more. And then yeah, to the piece of health literacy gaps is prevalent when it comes to aging. Yeah, that's a huge piece. Again, about my research. That's why we give our participants these health report cards, so it tells them their data relative to age and sex match norms, just so they can have an idea of how they're aging, if you will.
Okay, there's another question. What signs should people with hearing loss be aware of that would indicate early dementia symptoms versus normal aging?
Yeah,
That's an interesting question too.
that's a great question, and it's a loaded question. I will admit. And I think, as soon as you're worried or have concerns, I think that is the time to talk to someone. Don't brush it aside as something else. So that's one caveat to that. Um, then you ignite that process, and there's certain testing that can be done to find out where exactly you are. And again, this is where clinic or clinicians meet researchers. On top of that, I do like, it's a bit harsh, but I do like the analogy of forgetting where your keys are. That's normal. Forgetting what your keys are used for, that's dementia. And again, I know that's a little harsh to think about, but maybe by the time we're forgetting what our keys are for, that's a little too far down the trajectory. But yeah.
That's a good analogy. And I would say we tell people that it's usually people around you who notice your hearing loss first, because
Mhm.
you don't know what you're missing when you're missing it. I would say it's probably true for people with cognitive issues
Mhm.
that because you're lacking those cognitive abilities, you might not notice that you are declining in them. Not always.
Mhm.
So probably the close family and friends and people who know you for a long time and who can observe the differences over time, they would probably be the ones to notice it first and let you know. So it's probably a good idea to listen, to
Yeah.
your children or to your friends or your family if they say, you know what, that is something that probably you should check out.
Yeah, more often than not, we do have a spouse or a child recommending someone to us. Um, yeah, to get checked out, I'll say.
And the last question so far.
Mm.
uh, Now, Naomi is saying, thank you for your presentation. Can you comment on bone conduction devices and brain activity? Um, so what she means, I'm thinking, is bone conducting hearing aids or BAHAs.
Okay.
Uh, and that is just a different type of hearing aid. Usually they work in the exact same way. They do conduct the sound to your brain where it is important that it gets to. And I would say that there is no difference between a conventional hearing aid or the bone conducting hearing aid because the sound, no matter how it gets to the brain, it does get to the brain. So it would probably have the same effect. But I'm not sure if you have anything to add, Nick.
No, I would agree with that. And again, I think, it reflects my ignorance, but also trying to paint with broad strokes. When I say hearing aids, I just mean any
Yes,
hearing
any
support device.
personal amplification technology. Yeah. So this is all our questions, and we ran a little bit longer than
That's
expected,
okay.
but it's great that there was so much interest and so many questions. It just
Wonderful.
goes to show that, this is the pertinent topic that is very acutely interesting to people, and thank you for coming and educating us on this issue.
Yeah, no, wonderful. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone for the engagement. It's always nice to have that, especially when it's online and you feel like you're just talking to a computer. So no, I appreciate it very much so.
And that is all for today. Thank you for joining us and have a great day. Thank you, Nick.
All right, thanks again, Marta.